The chamber stretched into darkness above, its crystalline walls alive with the light of 10,000 data streams. Each stream represented a species. Each species controlled dozens of worlds. And every single representative in that vast space had turned to stare at the small figure standing alone on the observation platform. Marcus Thorne kept his hands steady at his sides. He was 23 years old. He wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's first interstellar exchange program, and he was about to face judgment from the most powerful governing body in the known universe. The Galactic Council had existed for longer than humanity had possessed language. Its headquarters occupied an artificial moon that orbited a dying star, chosen specifically because no species could claim it as territory. The judgment chamber itself could hold 50,000 beings comfortably. Today, it held nearly twice that number. They had come to see the human. High Arbiter Calvex rose from his seat at the center of the council's ruling tier. He stood 12 feet tall, his body covered in plates of black chitin that reflected the chamber's ambient light like polished obsidian. His species, the Mordrani, had conquered star systems while humanity was still learning to walk upright. Cadet Marcus Thorne of Earth, Calvex said, his voice carrying through translation systems that converted his clicking speech into something human ears could understand. You stand before this council accused of psychological instability. How do you respond? Marcus took a breath. Above him, the data streams pulsed with the attention of civilizations that could erase Earth from existence without effort. Around him, beings of every shape imaginable watched with organs that served as eyes, sensors, or something stranger still. I would like to understand the accusation more clearly. High Arbiter. Calvex's mandibles clicked in what might have been surprise. Most beings who stood on the observation platform could barely speak. The platform itself was designed to intimidate. A disk of transparent metal suspended above a void that seemed to fall forever into absolute darkness. You were subjected to the standardized psychological evaluation required of all cadets entering the combined Fleet Academy, Calvex said. The evaluation consists of 12 scenarios designed to measure fear response, stress tolerance, and psychological stability. You failed. With respect, High Arbiter, I completed every scenario. You laughed. The word echoed through the chamber. 50,000 beings shifted, murmured, clicked, and hummed their reactions. The sound was like standing in the middle of an alien. Ocean. Ambassador Theska of the Velmari slithered forward from her position among the diplomatic corps. Her serpentine body was covered in scales that shifted color with her emotions, currently cycling through shades of angry crimson and confused violet. During the Apex Predator simulation, you laughed, Theska said. During the Void Exposure Protocol, you laughed. During the Extinction Cascade scenario, which has caused permanent psychological damage to cadets from warrior species, you laughed so hard that you requested a hydration break. Marcus nodded slowly. That's accurate. Explain yourself. May I ask a question first? Calvex's compound eyes focused on him with an intensity that would have made most beings collapse. You are on trial, not conducting an inquiry. Then consider it part of my defense. A long silence followed. Finally, Calvex gestured with one clawed appendage. Proceed. What is the purpose of the fear tests? Theska's scales flickered. To identify psychological stability. To ensure cadets can function under extreme stress. To eliminate those whose fear responses would endanger their units in combat situations. Then what response were you expecting from me? Controlled fear. Managed terror. Evidence that you understood the dangers you faced and could overcome them through training and discipline. Theska's tail coiled beneath her. Instead, you treated our most sophisticated psychological warfare simulations as entertainment. Marcus turned in a slow circle, addressing not just Theska and Kolvix, but the entire assembled council. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. 300 years ago, a human named Ernest Shackleton led an expedition to cross the Antarctic, the frozen continent at the bottom of our world. Their ship was crushed by ice. They were stranded for nearly 2 years with no hope of rescue, no communication, in temperatures that would kill any unprotected Mordrani in minutes. He paused, letting the translation systems catch up. All 27 men survived. Do you know how? They played games on the ice. They organized singing competitions. They celebrated birthdays with whatever scraps of food they could find. When faced with what should have been certain death, humans do not just endure. We throw parties. The chamber had gone quiet. Your apex predator simulation showed me creatures designed to trigger primal terror responses. But High Arbiter, I grew up on a planet where we keep apex predators as pets. We call them dogs. Some of us swim with sharks for recreation. We climb mountains that kill hundreds of us every year, and we call it a vacation. Marcus smiled, not with defiance, but with genuine warmth. I did not laugh because I am unstable. I laughed because after 10,000 years of trying to kill us, our own planet never succeeded. Your simulations felt like nostalgia. Kolvex leaned forward. You expect us to believe that your species finds existential terror amusing? I expect you to understand that fear means something different to us than it does to you. Marcus met the High Arbiter's gaze directly, something that made several nearby diplomats gasp. Your tests are designed using psychological profiles from species that evolved on stable worlds. Worlds where survival was possible through caution, through fear, through avoiding danger. He spread his hands. Earth is not stable. Our planet has experienced 5 mass extinction events. Our climate shifts without warning. Our tectonic plates move beneath our feet. Every creature that exists on our world evolved in an environment that was actively trying to kill it at all times. You are describing a death world, Theska said. Her scales now pale with something that might have been horror. I am describing home. Marcus's voice softened. When you evolve on a death world, fear becomes something else. Not a warning to flee. Not a signal to hide. Fear becomes information. It tells you what matters, what you need to pay attention to, what you might need to fight. He looked up at the darkness above, at the light of 10,000 civilizations watching him. The beings who designed your fear tests assumed that all intelligent species experience terror the same way. They were wrong. Humans do not overcome fear through discipline. We transform it. We turn it into stories, into songs, into the kind of dark humor that lets us look at the worst the universe can offer and say, that is impressive, but have you seen what we have survived? Kolvex stood motionless for a long moment. Then his mandibles clicked in a Z, pattern that the translation system rendered as thoughtful. Consideration. You are suggesting that humanity's psychological profile represents something outside our existing models. I am suggesting that you have never encountered a species that weaponized fear itself. That turned the survival instinct into a tool for growth rather than a limitation to be managed. And your laughter during the tests? Marcus's smile returned. On Earth, when a human laughs in the face of danger, it means we have already accepted the worst possible outcome. We have made peace with it. And now we are free to act without the paralysis that fear normally creates. He stepped forward, and the platform did not tremble beneath him. You asked if I am psychologically unstable. I am not. I am exactly what 10,000 years of evolution on a world that wanted us dead has created. And if you expel me from your academy for being too fearless, you will miss something important. What is that? That everything you think you know about psychological limits is based on species that evolved on gentle worlds. Marcus's voice carried across the chamber, reaching every translator, every ear, every sensor array. Earth is not gentle, and we are what it made us. The chamber erupted in noise. Beings argued, debated, and questioned in languages that had never been heard by human ears before this moment. But Marcus stood calm at the center of it all, waiting. He had delivered his message. Now he would see if the galaxy was ready to hear it. High Arbiter Colvex raised one clawed appendage, and silence fell. "The Council will recess to deliberate," he said. "Cadet Thorn, you will be confined to quarters until a verdict is reached." The platform began to lower, carrying Marcus toward the exit below. As he descended, he heard something that made his smile widen. It was the sound of uncertainty. The sound of 10,000 species realizing that their assumptions about psychology, about fear, about the very nature of intelligence might be incomplete. Marcus Thorn had come to this chamber as a cadet facing expulsion. He was leaving as something else entirely. A question that the galaxy would have to answer. And somewhere in the depths of the Council headquarters, that question was already spreading, carried by diplomats and observers who would return to their own worlds with stories of the human who laughed at fear itself. The trial was just beginning. But Marcus had already won the first battle. The Council's verdict arrived 3 days later. Marcus was not expelled. Instead, he would face something far worse. They called it the Trial of Predation. Director Helena Vance, Earth's senior diplomatic representative, stood in Marcus's quarters with her arms crossed and fury written across her weathered face. She had spent 30 years building humanity's reputation among the stars, and this young cadet had just complicated everything. "Do you understand what they are asking you to do?" she demanded. Marcus looked up from the equipment manifest he had been studying. "Survive 72 hours on Vethros 7. Avoid or neutralize hostile fauna. Demonstrate psychological stability under extreme conditions. This trial is reserved for species applying for full military partnership with the Council, not individual cadets. They are bending their own rules to study you. I know." Helena's expression shifted from anger to something closer to concern. "The survival rate for unprepared candidates is 31%. You will be dropped onto a preserved world where the galaxy's most dangerous predators have been collected and allowed to evolve without interference for millions of years." Marcus stood and began organizing his minimal gear. "I read the briefing documents, and you are not afraid." He paused, considering the question seriously. "I am appropriately concerned. There is a difference." Helena watched him for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. "The government knew about the fear tests before you were selected for this program." Marcus went still. "We analyzed preliminary data from other species who had attempted the Academy evaluation. We identified patterns in what the tests measured and how different psychological profiles responded." Helena's voice was careful now. "We chose you specifically because our models suggested humanity's fear responses would register as anomalous. You used me as a test subject. We used you as proof of concept. Earth needed to demonstrate something to the Council, something that would change how they viewed us. And you have delivered that demonstration spectacularly." Marcus absorbed this information. He should have been angry. Instead, he found himself calculating the implications. Earth had not sent him here blindly. They had a strategy. "What else do you need me to prove?" Helena smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. "Survive the trial. Show them what a human can do when the stakes are real. And if possible, teach them something they have never learned before." "What is that?" "That fear is not our weakness. It is our greatest weapon." The dropship descended through Vethros 7's atmosphere like a falling star. Inside, Marcus sat among 4 alien cadets who who had been assigned to accompany him. None of them looked happy about the arrangement. Torvak was Mordrani, his black chitin armor making him nearly invulnerable to physical attack. He had passed his own fear tests with the highest scores in his generation, and being assigned to supervise a human clearly wounded his pride. Whisper was Nelvani, a being whose species communicated through subsonic vibrations undetectable to most other races. Her translucent skin showed the movement of organs beneath, and her enormous eyes tracked every motion in the cabin with predatory attention. Gren was Thorian, a massive creature whose regenerative abilities made him effectively immortal. His species had never faced a threat they could not simply outlast, and he regarded the upcoming trial with something close to boredom. Lieutenant Commander Yriska was Velmari, her serpentine body coiled in the seat beside Marcus. She had been assigned to observe and report on the human's performance. Her scales shifted through shades of suspicious gray as she watched him. "The Council expects you to fail," Torvak said bluntly. "They want documentation of human psychological collapse under real survival conditions." Marcus did not look up from the soil sample he had collected the moment they landed. "What do you expect?" "I expect to carry your body back to the extraction point." "Noted." The first hour on Vethru 7 passed in tense silence. Marcus moved through the alien jungle with careful attention, stopping frequently to examine plants, insects, and soil composition. His squad mates watched with growing confusion. "What are you doing?" Whisper asked, her sonic voice rendered audible through translation technology. "Learning who lives here." Torvak's mandibles clicked in dismissal. The briefing documents contain complete ecological surveys. Documents are not the same as understanding. Marcus knelt beside a patch of disturbed earth, sniffing the soil. "Something large passed through here recently. Carnivore, based on the chemical traces. Probably territorial, based on the marking patterns." Gren rumbled with what might have been laughter. "You can determine all that from dirt?" "Humans spent most of our evolutionary history tracking prey across varied terrain. Reading the land is instinctive for us." Marcus stood and pointed to a seemingly innocent clearing ahead. "That area smells wrong. We should go around." Yriska's scales flickered with skepticism. "The clearing offers the most direct route to defensible high ground. The clearing is a trap." The squad ignored him. 30 minutes later, Gren stepped into the center of the clearing and sank waist-deep into a pit of digestive acid secreted by a colonial organism living beneath the surface dot his regeneration saved. Him, barely. The process took 2 hours and left him weakened. From that moment, the squad began listening to the human got night fell like a curtain. The jungle came alive with sounds that had no equivalent in human experience. Things moved in the darkness, massive and patient, studying the newcomers with senses that had evolved over millions of years. Marcus built a fire. Torvak objected immediately. "Fire will attract predators. Fire will announce our presence, yes, but it will also tell every predator in range that we are not hiding, that we are confident, that we might be more trouble than we are worth." Marcus fed dry vegetation into the flames. Predators prefer easy prey. "We need to look difficult." The night passed without attack. In the morning, they encountered their first major threat. A sylph crawler emerged from camouflage, so perfect that it seemed to materialize from nothing. It was the size of a ground transport, covered in sensory tendrils that tasted the air for chemical signatures of fear. 19 cadets had died to this species over the trial's history. Standard doctrine was immediate retreat. Marcus picked up a rock. "What are you doing?" Yriska hissed. "Establishing communication." He threw the rock at the crawler's sensory cluster. The squad froze in horror. Throwing objects at a sylph crawler triggered immediate attack response. Every study confirmed this. Every survival manual warned against it. The crawler flinched. retreated, vanished into the undergrowth as if it had never existed. Torvak's mandibles hung open. Impossible. Persistence predator display. Marcus brushed dirt from his hands. Humans evolved as pursuit hunters. We chased prey across open terrain until it died of exhaustion. Most species in the galaxy recognize that body language instinctively, even if they have never encountered us. They know what we are. You are telling me that creature was afraid of you? I am telling you that everything on this planet can sense what humans are at a biological level. We have spent millions of years teaching the universe to fear us. That lesson is written into the survival instincts of every prey species that ever existed. Whisper's enormous eyes fixed on Marcus with new intensity. Your species is a persistence predator. You hunt by never stopping. We hunt by refusing to give up, by being too stubborn to accept defeat, by making our prey understand that no matter how far it runs, we will still be coming. Marcus smiled, and it was not entirely friendly. That is why your fear tests did not work on me. Fear is supposed to make beings stop. For humans, fear is what tells us to keep going. The second day brought greater challenges. A pack of Veth stalkers found their trail, coordinated hunters that had ended 3 previous trials. Standard protocol called for using thorian regeneration as bait, while others escaped. Marcus refused. Instead, he walked toward the pack leader, maintained eye contact, showed his teeth. He has gone insane, Yriska whispered, but the pack leader did not attack. As Marcus approached, step by deliberate step, something ancient and primal recognized what it was facing. Not prey, not a competing predator. Something worse, something that would not stop. The pack scattered. That night, around the fire, Marcus finally explained what the Council had never understood. Fear is a tool. On Earth, we learn to use it in both directions. We feel it, but we also project it. Every species on this planet is an apex predator from somewhere, but none of them evolved alongside something that hunted everything, everywhere, across every terrain, using every weapon it could find or invent. He looked at each of his squadmates in turn. You asked why I laughed during the fear tests. It was because I recognized what they were showing me. Those simulations were designed using psychological profiles from prey species, beings that evolved to run, hide, or submit. But humans did not evolve to be prey. His voice dropped to something quiet and dangerous. We evolved to be the thing that everything else runs from. Silence held the camp. Then Torvak spoke, his voice strange. What happens when something does not run? Marcus's smile returned, sharp and certain. Then we teach it why it should have. But as the squad slept, one member was not resting. Riska's scales shifted through colors of guilt and determination as she transmitted a coded message to a ship in orbit. She had been given orders before the trial began. Orders that had nothing to do with the Council. The human had proven too dangerous. Too unpredictable. Certain factions had decided that the trial of predation would end with Marcus Thorne's death. A Velmare Special Operations Team was already descending through the atmosphere. By morning, the hunters would become the hunted. But as Yriska finished her transmission and prepared to sleep, she became aware of something that made her scales turn pale. Marcus was awake. His eyes were open in the darkness, staring directly at her position. He had been watching the entire time. "Lieutenant Commander," he whispered, his voice carrying just far enough to reach her ears. "We need to talk about what you just did." Riska's heart pounded against her ribs. The human's eyes reflected the dying firelight, steady and unblinking. He had been watching her transmit coordinates to a kill team. He knew everything. She expected violence. She expected accusations. She expected the primal rage that her briefings had warned about when humans felt betrayed. Instead, Marcus rose quietly, and gestured for her to follow him away from the sleeping squad dot by a stream that glittered with bioluminescent organisms. The human spoke in a voice, barely above a whisper. "Tell me about the factions. Tell me who sent you." Yurska's scale cycled through colors she could not control. Fear, shame, resignation. "How did you know?" "You have been watching me too closely." Not with suspicion about the trial. With the attention of someone waiting for the right moment. Marcus crouched beside the water, his posture relaxed despite the circumstances. "I have been expecting something like this since the council chamber. Humanity's entry into galactic civilization threatens too many established interests. The Vel Mari Strategic Directorate believes your species represents an existential risk. Your psychological profile suggests you cannot be controlled, predicted, or contained." Yuriska's voice was flat with defeat. "They decided that a tragic accident during the trial would solve the problem before it grows larger." "How many operators?" 6. Full stealth capability. Neural disruptors designed to incapacitate without leaving evidence. She paused. "They are already on approach." 4 hours at most. Marcus nodded slowly, processing the information. Then he asked the question that made no sense to her. "Why did you follow orders you knew were wrong?" Riska's scales flickered with confusion. "I am a soldier. I follow commands." "No, you are a thinking being who made a choice. You could have refused. You could have warned me. You could have done 100 different things." Marcus turned to face her fully. "But you transmitted those coordinates anyway." "Why?" The silence stretched. Finally, Riska answered honestly. "Because I was afraid. Of what would happen if I disobeyed. Of what my government would do to my family. Of what humanity might become if left unchecked." Her voice cracked. "I have seen the footage of your wars. The things your species does to each other. The casual cruelty you are capable of when you feel threatened. And you thought killing me would make that danger smaller? I thought it would buy time. Allow the Council to develop countermeasures. Give the galaxy a chance to prepare for what humanity represents." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice held something unexpected. "Understanding. Fear makes us do terrible things. Humans know this better than anyone. We have spent our entire history learning what happens when fear controls our decisions." He reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, and Yuriska flinched at the warmth of it. "But we have also learned something else. Fear can be transformed. It does not have to control us." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you have a choice right now. Help me survive what is coming, and I will ensure your role is never discovered. Your family remains safe. Your career continues. And maybe, together, we can show the galaxy that fear does not have to lead to violence." Yuriska stared at him. "You would trust me? After what I did? I would give you a chance to make a different choice. That is what humans do. We believe in second chances, in redemption, in the possibility that beings can become better than their worst moments." Marcus's smile was tired but genuine. "Besides, you have information I need. And I have approximately 4 hours to turn this trial ground into the worst day of those operators' lives. The next 3 hours transformed Vethro 7 into something the galaxy had never seen. Marcus woke the squad with 4 words. "We are being hunted." He did not explain by whom. He did not need to. Every member of the squad was a military cadet from a warrior culture. They understood immediately that the rules had changed. What followed was a demonstration of human warfare doctrine that would be studied in military academies for generations. Marcus identified terrain, features that favored defenders, choke points where the jungle narrowed, overlooks with clear sight lines, natural obstacles that would slow any approach. He assigned roles based on each species' strengths, positioning the squad like pieces on a game board that only he could fully see. But the real weapon was not tactics. It was the traps. Marcus spent 2 hours constructing what he called welcomes. Deadfalls made from fallen trees and weighted stones. Snares hidden beneath leaf litter. Pit traps lined with stakes coated in toxins harvested from local plants. A tripwire connected to containers of bioluminescent insects that would illuminate anyone who triggered them. Torvak watched the construction with growing horror. These are not defensive measures. These are designed to cause suffering. These are designed to cause hesitation. Marcus did not look up from his work. When the first operator triggers a trap, the others will slow down. They will become careful. They will start seeing threats everywhere, even where none exist. That is the goal. You want them afraid. I want them to understand what they are walking into. Fear is information. Remember. Right now, those operators think they are hunting 1 human and 4 alien cadets. By the time they reach our position, they will know they are facing something else entirely. Gren rumbled with uneasy respect. What will they be facing? Marcus finally looked up, and something in his expression made even the massive Thorian step back. They will be facing humanity. The real thing. Not the sanitized version that passed your psychological evaluations. Not the diplomatic face we showed the Council. The thing that survived ice ages and mass extinctions and every horror our planet could throw at us. He drove a final stake into the ground. They came here to hunt a human. I am going to teach them why that was a mistake. Dawn broke red across the jungle canopy. The Velmurray team entered the prepared kill zone with professional confidence. They had eliminated targets across 100 worlds. 1 human was a simple assignment. The first operator triggered a tripwire and was immediately coated in bioluminescent secretions, his stealth systems rendered useless. Before he could react, Torvak materialized from the undergrowth, his chitin-armored fist sending the operator crashing into a tree with force that cracked his tactical vest. The second operator moved to assist and stepped into a concealed pit. The fall broke her leg. The toxin coating the stakes began working immediately, flooding her nervous system with pain signals that made her scream. Across every frequency her helmet could broadcast. Remaining 4 realized they had stumbled into an ambush, designed by something that thought like them. But worse, Marcus's voice echoed through the forest, bounced off rock formations to make its source impossible to determine. You came here to hunt a human. I need you to understand something about what that means. A third operator went down when Whisper appeared behind him, moving with perfect silence. Her sonic communication disrupting his neural implants long enough for a nerve strike to drop him. Humans do not just survive. We do not just endure. When something threatens us, we find out everything about it. We learn its weaknesses. We build tools to exploit those weaknesses. And then we do not just defeat our enemies. The fourth operator panicked and ran directly into Torvak's waiting claws. We make sure they never threaten us again. 2 operators remained. They had dropped to defensive positions, weapons sweeping the jungle, searching for targets that seemed to appear and vanish like ghosts. Terms? One of them called out, his voice shaking. Surrender your weapons and emergency beacon. Submit to restraint. When we are extracted, you will be handed over to Council security rather than left here for the wildlife. Marcus emerged from cover, walking toward them with the casual confidence of someone who had already won. That is more mercy than you are planning to show us. The operators exchanged glances. They were professionals. They could calculate odds. Weapons hit the ground. When Council extraction teams arrived 6 hours later, they found something unprecedented. A human cadet and his squad stood over 6 restrained Velmurray operators. surrounded by a network of traps sophisticated enough to make military historians weep with professional admiration. The footage from squad helmet cameras had already been transmitted to Academy servers. Within hours, the entire combined fleet had seen what a single human did when faced with a kill team sent to murder him. High Arbiter Kolvik summoned Marcus to his private chambers. The space was sparse, decorated only with trophies from the Mordrini's long history of conquest. Kolviks regarded the human with something that might have been respect. The Council has been debating humanity's place in galactic civilization for weeks. Some believe you are too dangerous to admit. Others believe you are too valuable to exclude. And what do you believe, High Arbiter? Kolvik's compound eyes focused on Marcus with the full weight of a species that had dominated the stars for millennia. I believe that everything you have shown us has been deliberate. The laughter, the competence, the mercy you showed those who came to kill you. You are not just surviving these tests. You are teaching us about humanity. Is that a problem? It is a declaration. A statement of capability disguised as vulnerability. Kolvex leaned forward. You came here as a cadet. You have behaved like an ambassador. Now I must ask you a question that will determine everything that follows. Ask, what does humanity want? Marcus considered the question carefully. He thought about Earth, about the billions of people who had watched his trial broadcast across the planet. He thought about Helena Vance and the strategy that had placed him here. He thought about Euriska, who had betrayed him and then helped save him. We want you to stop being afraid of us. Kolvex's mandibles clicked in surprise. That is not what I expected. You expected us to demand power, territory, influence. Marcus shook his head. We do not want those things. We want partnership. We want to learn from you and teach you what we know. We want to help solve problems that no single species can solve alone. Why? Because the galaxy has much bigger problems than one species of Deathworld survivors who laugh at fear tests. And if you let us, we would like to help you face them. Marcus held the High Arbiter's gaze, and for a moment, something passed between them. An understanding that transcended species, culture, and the vast gulf of evolutionary history. The trial is concluded, Kolvex said finally. Cadet Thorn, you have demonstrated psychological stability under conditions that would break most beings. You have shown tactical capability that exceeds our models. And you have made an enemy of factions that will not forget this day. I am aware. Good. Kolvex rose to his full height. Because your training begins tomorrow. And I suspect you will need every skill humanity possesses for what comes next. Marcus nodded and turned to leave. At the door, he paused. High Arbiter. The operator's eye captured. What will happen to them? They will be interrogated. Their handlers will be identified. The Velmurray Directorate will face consequences. And Euriska? Kolvik studied him for a long moment. Her role in alerting you to the threat has been noted. She will be reassigned to a position where her divided loyalties can be monitored. She made a choice when it mattered. She deserves a chance to prove herself. That is not your decision to make. No, but it is my request. Marcus met the High Arbiter's eyes. Humanity believes in second chances. We believe beings can become better than their worst moments. If you want to understand us, start there. He walked out before Kolvex could respond. But behind him, the High Arbiters. Mandibles clicked in a pattern that the translation. Systems could not render dot. It might have been. Consideration dot. It might have been the beginning of. Something new. 6 months had passed since the trial of predation. The galaxy had changed, and Marcus Thorn had changed with it. Human cadets now numbered in the hundreds, spread across every training facility in Council space. Their presence had forced a complete restructuring of psychological evaluation protocols. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers were now studying their history, their warfare, their strange ability to find joy in the face of extinction. But Marcus had been doing his own research. The fear tests had bothered him since the beginning. They were too sophisticated, too precisely calibrated, too effective at breaking minds. The Council claimed they had been developed through centuries of psychological research, but the technology did not match anything the current member species possessed. Someone else had built them. Someone older. Marcus stood in a sealed archive on Throvix 4, a dead moon that orbited a star so ancient it had burned through most of its fuel before humanity's ancestors emerged from the ocean. The archive had been here for longer than the Council itself had existed, and the data it contained had been classified at the highest levels. Until now. Are you certain about this? Torvik asked. The Mordrani warrior had become something like a friend over the past months. Their mutual respect forged in the crucible of Vethros 7. He stood guard at the archive entrance, his chitin armor gleaming in the dim light. The Council gave me access for a reason, Marcus replied, his fingers moving across a data interface that responded to his touch with reluctant acceptance. They want to know what I find. They want to know if you can be trusted with what you find. Same thing. The archive opened and information flooded across the display. Marcus had expected secrets. He had expected hidden history, suppressed knowledge, the kind of inconvenient truths that every civilization buried when they became inconvenient. He had not expected this. The species that built the fear tests were called the Architects. They had ruled this region of space for 17 million years before the current Council races had achieved sentience. They had mastered technologies that made modern starships look like primitive rafts. They had expanded across galaxies, seeding life on barren worlds, guiding evolution toward intelligence. And then they had vanished. Marcus read the fragmentary records with growing dread. The Architects had not died out naturally. They had not destroyed themselves through war or accident. They had been hunted. Something had come from the void between galaxies. Something drawn by the Architects' expansion, attracted by the light of their civilization, like moths to a flame. The Architects called them the Hollow. The records showed the final war. 17 million years of history, compressed into desperate fragments, transmitted to archives like this one in the hope that future species might learn from their failure. The Hollow did not fight with ships or weapons. They did not conquer through military force. They fed on fear. The Hollow were beings of pure psychic energy, existing as patterns of electromagnetic distortion that interfaced directly with consciousness itself. They attacked minds, not bodies. They found the places where intelligent beings were most vulnerable, most afraid, and they tore those places open until nothing remained but screaming emptiness. The Architects had built the fear tests as detection systems. They had created psychological evaluations designed to identify beings who might resist the Hollow's influence. Beings whose relationship with fear was different, stronger, more resilient. They had been searching for species like humanity, but they had run out of time. Marcus found the final transmission from the Architect homeworld. It was brief, recorded as the last city fell to psychological attacks that left billions catatonic, their minds consumed by terrors they could not escape. We failed. The Hollow cannot be destroyed through force. They cannot be negotiated with. They are not evil in any meaningful sense. They simply are what they are, and what they are is the end of everything that fears. But we have learned something in our final hours. Beings exist who do not fear as we do. Beings who have transformed terror into fuel, who have made peace with death, who laugh at the void. If you are reading this, you may be such a being. Find others like yourself. Train them. Prepare them. Because the Hollow are patient. They consumed us, and then they moved on, following the expansion of intelligent life across the cosmos. They will return. And when they do, only those who have mastered fear will survive. The transmission ended with coordinates. A star system at the edge of the galaxy. The direction the Hollow had traveled when they left. Architect space. They were coming back. Marcus presented his findings to High Arbiter Colvex in a closed session. The Mordrani leader listened in silence, his compound eyes unreadable. When Marcus finished, Colvex remained still for a long moment. The Council has suspected something like this for generations, Colvex said finally. There are anomalies in our expansion. Species that vanished without explanation. Colonies that went silent and were found with populations intact, but minds destroyed. We attributed these events to unknown natural phenomena. They were scouting runs. The Hollow testing the boundaries, sampling the local prey. Marcus's voice was steady, despite the horror of what he was describing. They are moving this way. Our long-range sensors have detected anomalies at the galaxy's edge. Patterns consistent with what the architects described. How long? Best estimates suggest first contact within 2 to 5 years. Colvex's mandibles clicked in a pattern that conveyed something beyond words. Fear, resignation, despair. Then it is already too late. No species in the current council has demonstrated meaningful resistance to psychological warfare of this magnitude. When the Hollow arrive, we will fall as the architects fell. No, Marcus stepped forward. That is exactly the wrong conclusion. Explain. The fear tests were not just evaluation tools. They were search algorithms designed to identify beings who might survive Hollow attacks. And in all the millions of years since the architects fell, in all the species that have joined the Council, how many have passed those tests with anomalous results? Colvex was silent. Humanity is not unique, Marcus continued. We are the first Deathworld species to reach this level of development, but we will not be the last. And even among existing Council members, there are individuals whose psychological profiles suggest unusual fear resistance. They have been overlooked, dismissed, sometimes even punished for their differences. You are suggesting we weaponize these individuals. I am suggesting we train them. Create a dedicated unit of beings who can resist Hollow influence, who can maintain function under psychological attacks that would destroy normal minds. Call it the Deathworld Corps. And you would lead this unit? I would help build it. But leadership should come from multiple species. This cannot be a human project. It must be a galactic response to a galactic threat. Colvex studied the human for a long time. Then his mandibles clicked in what the translation system rendered as grim determination. The Council will resist this. They will deny the threat, argue about jurisdiction, demand more evidence. Politics will slow everything. Then we work outside official channels. Build the cores quietly. Train our people in secret. When the Hollow arrive, we present the Council with a fait accompli. You are asking me to betray my own government. I am asking you to save. The Deathworld Corps began as 12 beings gathered in a forgotten training facility on Aqua. World too hostile for normal habitation. Marcus had selected them personally, drawing from military forces across the Council based on psychological profiles that showed unusual fear responses. There was Torvak, whose shame at needing human help had transformed into fierce loyalty. Whisper, whose species' subsonic communication allowed fear-resistant thought patterns to be shared directly between minds. Gren, whose regenerative abilities meant he could survive experiences that would destroy others, allowing him to build tolerance through exposure. And there was Riska, reassigned from Velmari intelligence to a position where her divided loyalties could be monitored. She had requested the transfer herself, seeking redemption for her betrayal on VETH Ross-7. Marcus trained them using methods developed over thousands of years of human history. horror stories that inoculated against psychological attack, extreme physical challenges that taught the body to function despite the mind's screaming protests, dark humor that transformed terror into manageable absurdity. The washout rate was brutal. Of the first 50 candidates, only 17 completed the program. But those who emerged were transformed. "You have learned everything we can teach you about fear," Marcus told the first graduating class. "You have faced simulations based on architect technology, reconstructed from fragmentary data. You have survived experiences that would break any unprepared mind." He looked at each of them, seeing not just soldiers, but the seeds of something larger. The Hollow believe fear is a weapon they can use against us. They have spent millions of years refining their techniques, perfecting their ability to break intelligent beings. They have never failed. His voice hardened. They have also never encountered a galaxy that knew they were coming, that prepared for them, that took their greatest weapon and turned it into a shield. When they arrive, they will try to break you. They will show you horrors that would shatter unprepared minds. And when that happens, I want you to remember what you learned here. "What is that, Commander?" someone asked. Marcus smiled, and it was the smile he had worn in the Council Judgment Chamber. The smile he had worn on Vethros 7, the smile that had declared war on the galaxy's expectations. That fear is just life's way of reminding you that something matters, that the universe is beautiful because it is temporary, and that the only appropriate response to cosmic horror is to look it in the eye and ask if it wants to dance. The celebration that followed was exactly the kind of defiant joy that the Hollow would never understand. But in the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge, something ancient stirred. It had fed on civilizations beyond counting, consumed species that had seemed invincible, watched the light of countless stars dim as their inhabitants' minds collapsed into screaming emptiness. It was patient. It was eternal. And it was finally turning back toward the prey it had left behind so long ago. Hollow were coming, and for the first time in 17 million years, something was waiting for them. The Hollow emerged from fold space 18 months ahead of schedule. They came not as ships or armies, but as a darkness that spread across sensor arrays like ink bleeding through water. Early warning stations went silent in a pattern that suggested not destruction, but something worse. Entire crews simply stopped functioning, their minds overwhelmed by terrors they could not name. The Council's response was chaos. Species that had never faced existential threats had no protocols for this kind of war. Fleet commanders debated whether engagement was even possible. Politicians argued about jurisdiction, while worlds fell silent one by one. But the Death World, Kors, was already moving. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Persistence, a warship designed around human psychological warfare doctrine. The crew was a mixture of species, every one of them a graduate of his training program. They had spent years preparing for this moment. Now they would discover if that preparation was enough. "Contact in 7 minutes, Torvak reported from the tactical station. His chitin armor had been modified with neural dampeners designed to resist Hollow influence. Long-range scans confirmed the anomaly matches architect descriptions. Crew status? All stations report ready. Fear levels elevated, but within acceptable parameters. Torvak's mandibles clicked in what might have been dark humor. Whisperers telling jokes over the internal communication channel. Terrible ones. Perfect. That is exactly what we trained for. The Hollow did not communicate in any conventional sense. They existed as patterns of weaponized information, beings made of pure psychological attack. As the Persistence closed range, Marcus felt their presence like pressure against his skull. Images flickered at the edges of his vision. Memories he had buried decades ago clawed their way toward the surface. Around him, crew members stiffened as the first wave hit. The Hollow were probing, testing, searching for the cracks in their defenses. Status report. 17% psychological casualties in the first 30 seconds, Yuriska called from her station. Her scales were pale with strain, but her voice remained steady. The rest are holding. 17%. In any normal engagement, that would be catastrophic. But these were not normal circumstances. Open a channel. All frequencies. Channel open. Marcus spoke into the darkness, knowing the hollow could hear him, knowing they could understand. My name is Marcus Thorne. I represent a species called humanity, from a planet called Earth. You do not know us yet, but you will. The pressure intensified. The hollow were curious. That was good. Curiosity meant they were not simply attacking with full force. You have fed on civilizations across this galaxy. You have consumed species that built empires spanning thousands of worlds. You believe that intelligent life is prey, and fear is the weapon that makes predation possible. More images. More buried memories. Marcus saw his mother's face, twisted in disappointment. He saw friends who had died, choices he had made wrong, fears he had never truly overcome. He laughed. The sound was unexpected, enough that it actually disrupted the hollow's attack pattern. For a fraction of a second, the pressure eased. I laughed because you are using the same techniques that have worked for 17 million years. And I understand why. Fear is powerful. Fear is universal. Every intelligent being experiences it, and that makes every intelligent being vulnerable to you. He stepped toward the main view screen, where the hollow's presence manifested as a shifting pattern of darkness that hurt to look at directly. But you made a mistake when you came here. You found a galaxy that had been warned, that had time to prepare, that had discovered something your previous prey never realized. Fear is not a weakness to be exploited. Fear is a tool to be mastered. The second wave hit. This one was designed to overwhelm, not probe. Crew members screamed as their worst nightmares manifested with perfect clarity. The ship's lights flickered. System began to fail as operators lost focus. Marcus did not flinch. On Earth, we have a tradition. When faced with impossible odds, we gather together and tell stories. Not stories of hope or triumph. Stories of horror. We deliberately frighten ourselves, collectively. And then we laugh about it afterward. He walked through the bridge, steadying crew members with a hand on their shoulders, his voice carrying clearly despite the chaos around him. We do this because we discovered something your other victims never learned. Fear shared is fear halved. Terror faced together becomes manageable. And horror transformed into story becomes just another adventure to survive. The hollow pressed harder. Marcus saw his death in 100 different ways. He saw Earth burning. He saw everyone he had ever cared about dying in agony while he watched helplessly. He smiled. You want to know why that does not work on me? It is because I have already accepted all of those possibilities. Every human has. We grow up knowing that everything ends, that death is waiting, that the universe is vast and cold and utterly indifferent to our existence. And we decided that was okay. The pressure shifted. The hollow were no longer just attacking. They were trying to understand. We decided that mortality makes life precious, that fear makes courage meaningful, that the darkness only matters because light exists to contrast it. We took everything you use as weapons, and we made them into the foundation of our philosophy, our art, our entire way of seeing the universe. Marcus turned to face the darkness directly. You cannot break beings who have already made peace with being broken. You cannot terrify beings who have spent their entire evolution learning to dance with terror. You cannot consume beings who have already decided that fear is just the price of being alive. Silence. The attacks stopped. The hollow were listening. I am not going to pretend we can destroy you. You are ancient and vast and more powerful than anything this galaxy has faced. But I can promise you this. For every mind you consume, 100 will rise to replace it. For every world you silence, 1,000 voices will scream defiance. And no matter how long you hunt us, no matter how many you take, there will always be beings who have learned to laugh at fear. We are not prey. We are humanity. And we are the thing that fear itself learned to fear. The battle lasted 17 hours. The Persistence lost 40% of its crew to psychological casualties, and 3 other Deathworld Corps vessels were destroyed entirely. But when it was over, the Hollow had retreated, not defeated. They were too ancient, too vast for a single engagement to destroy them. But confused, uncertain, for the first time in their existence, they had encountered something that did not behave like prey. The message spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The humans held the line. The Deathworld Corps proved that resistance was possible, and species that had been paralyzed by despair began to hope again. In the months that followed, everything changed. The Hollow did not disappear, but their advances slowed. Every year, more species developed resistance to their attacks. Every year, the galaxy became a little less vulnerable. Marcus Thorne was promoted to Admiral of the Galactic Defense Initiative. His job expanded beyond military command to something larger, coordinating the training of billions, developing new psychological countermeasures, serving as the living embodiment of humanity's contribution to galactic civilization. But on the anniversary of the first contact battle, he returned to the Persistence. The ship had been preserved as a memorial, its corridors still scarred by the psychic damage of that first engagement. He walked alone through the empty vessel, remembering the crew who had served, the ones who fell, the ones who laughed when everything seemed lost. Out at the bridge, Torvuk was waiting. The Mordrani warrior had aged, his chitin showing the cracks and repairs of a decade of continuous service. But his compound eyes still held the same fierce intelligence that had made him Marcus's first recruit. "They are asking for a speech," Torvak said. "The new cadets want to hear from the human who declared war on expectations." Marcus considered this. Then he shook his head. "Speeches are for beings who need to be convinced. Those cadets already know everything that matters." "And what is that?" Marcus looked out at the stars. The vast, indifferent cosmos that humanity had somehow made a little less indifferent through sheer stubborn refusal to be broken. That fear is just life's way of reminding you that something is worth fighting for, that the universe is beautiful because it is temporary, and that the only appropriate response to inevitable doom is to make it the best story you possibly can. He turned to his old friend and smiled. It was the same smile he had worn in the Council Judgment Chamber all those years ago, when he had faced the most powerful governing body in the galaxy and laughed at their fear tests. "Come on. There is a party somewhere, and I never miss a good party." They walked out together, leaving the memorial behind. Somewhere in the distance, music played and voices rose in celebration. It was the sound of a galaxy that had learned humanity's most important lesson. When the darkness comes, you do not just endure it. You throw a party, invite the darkness in, and teach it how to dance. Far beyond the galaxy's edge, the Hollow watched and waited. They were patient. They were eternal. They had consumed civilizations beyond counting. But for the first time in their existence, they were uncertain. The prey had looked back at them. The prey had laughed. And in that laughter, the Hollow heard something they had never encountered before. The sound of beings who had already won, no matter what happened next. The war was far from over. The Hollow would adapt, return, try new approaches. The galaxy would face challenges that Marcus could not yet imagine. But humanity had changed the rules. They had proven that fear could be transformed, that terror could be transcended, that even cosmic horror was just another story waiting to be told, and stories, as every human knew, or how civilization survived. In the end, that was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not weapons or technology or military might. Something simpler and more powerful. Hope, wrapped in laughter, seasoned with defiance, and served at the greatest party the universe had ever seen. The hollow might be eternal, but so were good stories, and humanity had the best ones.